Hello everyone, my name is Rolf Langsdorf. If you're on Perl, you might know me as LanX. I'm quite chatty on Perl. It's hard to miss me there. If you're not, it's okay. I'm from Germany, and as you can obviously hear from my accent, who of you is not a native speaker of English, may I ask? Okay, so I will give my talk in a German accent so you can understand it. Actually, I was at the YAPC in the US, and someone told me that my German sounds aggressive, or German sounds aggressive, also my accent. A year later, I was in Vietnam, and I apologized for my accent, and the tourist guide said, no, 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 I love German accent. I understand every fucking word if you speak English. So there's a point in it. And actually, German was designed 150 years ago, the standard German we speak, so that the theater companies could travel around and everybody understood them. Because half of Europe has German minorities, so they were traveling a lot. Okay, so let's get to the point. Extrapolating variables. I'm very much into syntactic sugar and introspection. And I wanted to have some do what I mean thing with SQL. But first, I have to explain to you what's the problem with SQL. If you use good SQL, you use placeholders. May I ask, you're all into placeholders, aren't you? That's very good. Because here you can see that this is a placeholder, and you execute and you give the variable, and this is a good SQL. Bad SQL is if you use string interpolation and you use the native possibility of Perl to interpolate the variable into the prepare statement, and then you execute it without a variable. Let me shortly remind you what's the problem about not using placeholders. The reasons are performance, auto-porting, and security. Actually, there's 2.5 problems, but I will explain. First, it's performance. If you use a prepare, a plan is built inside of the SQL engine. That is, it's optimizing, it's analyzing the SQL, it sees the placeholders, and it's optimizing the execution. If you're using a prepare every time for Clint, Sawyer, Reba Sushi, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Sorry, Reba. He knows me and I know him. But if you use placeholders, you have only one prepare and it's far more efficient. The next point is auto-porting. Suppose you have a name like O'Reilly with a hyphen and or an accent, or I don't know how it's called, and apostrophe. So in this case, it's an apostrophe, and you're interpolating it. You get an SQL error. It doesn't work, but you have auto-quoting out of the box. So otherwise, if you are using interpolation, you would running into the problem that you have always to do the quoting. The third problem, the worst one, is security, because you can have injections. Classical XKCD. My son is called drop table students, Robert drop table, little Bobby, so Bobby tables. So you all know this. Okay, but my intention is to have something which is more do what I mean. Because the good thing about if you have a lot of placeholders, it gets kind of problematic. Because these are positional parameters. And if you have to maintain an SQL statement with a lot of placeholders, and if you're building a complex SQL statement, you have a lot of maintenance to get the parameters in the right order. If you change something, you have to change a lot of points on the code. And especially here, you have an int statement with with an array. We have to interpolate here, and now it gets even more complicated. So positional placeholders are hard to maintain. But is the best of both worlds possible? Let's say we have something bad. The interpolation thing is bad but sexy in a way, and that's, I think this is one of the reasons why many people stick with it, because it's more intuitive to have the variable in the place where they can see it. And my goal is to have something which is very similar. And if we compare the former one and the next one, you see everything that I changed was a function called HMP, hold my place, taking the SQL. This is the goal of this talk. So you see the target I'm going to. Just an exercise SMP. There's also another little tiny difference, you see, because this will be replaced by a placeholder, you don't need the quotes. So I wanted to achieve this in a special way. So I definitely didn't want to have some kind of regex parsing the SQL and decomposing all kind of variables that Perl is capable to parse. Then I wanted to have it in a backwards compatible way. That is, that I can mix old SQL with a new one. So I can use this HMP function and still have code and gradually changing it. Then I wanted to have ease of use syntactic sugar. It's, oh, you see, my laptop broke down. My original laptop broke down a week ago. This is a very new laptop, so pardon me about the typos. I wanted easy migration and fault tolerance. Fault tolerance that I get a lot of early error messages if something goes wrong. So how do we achieve this? Oh, I have to wake up. How do we achieve this? With magic. A lot of magic. Different kinds of magic. Actually, I'm only using core modules with the exception of one module called PadWalker. All the other things you will see in this talk are core functionalities which are available in Perl for already 20 years. So even if you don't want to use this, you will learn a lot. So the basic ideas was decomposing in different parts is to have an object which is returned by hold my place, then expecting a code block and patching the DBI. Let's go into details. First of all, this HMP function is returning an object. Normally, second wake up. Normally, prepare takes a string, but in this case, HMP is returning an object because in this SQL, there's more than just a string. We need the positional parameters of the placeholders because we need to know where which placeholder is going to be. And what's happening is that this object, I call it O is for object, hold my place, will have an this is what actually happens. The prepare will see an object. So this is syntactically the same, not syntactically, this is semantically the same like before. So we create HMP creates an object and the object is fed into the prepare. And this object is blessed into the class hold my place. So, and the object attributes hold the string with the placeholders, which is created, and an array with the variables, with the references to the variables, which are supposed to be fed into the placeholders. So in that way, we can encapsulate the information in the object. But DBI can't handle objects in the prepare statements. It wants to have a string. The solution is to use overload or first magic. I don't know, who of you has ever used the overload pragma? Okay, not too many. The point is, if you have an object, you can overload the operators which operate on the object. You can have a class let's say, complex numbers, and then you can overload the plus and the multiplication of complex numbers so that it operates on the objects. And you can also overload stringification. So overloading the stringification means if you have the object hold my place inside a string interpolation, it will be it will return the string. This is exactly what is happening here when I overload in the package hold my place. It will return the string field, the string attribute of the object. Hence, the prepare will work out of the box. Problem solved. Now, the next step is reversing the interpolation. So we have this string with the interpolation, with the variables which are interpolated, but we want to achieve, like I told you before, we want to have the placeholders in place and we want the variables in the right order. So the trick is this HMP function has a prototype. Who of you knows prototypes? Not the majority. So what's happening is that this is semantically the same like having an anonymous subroutine, and the string is fed in as a function reference. And because that's not really magic, but one feature of Perl is the last statement in a function is automatically returned. So this is syntactic sugar. We can write this, and we have actually this. And the point now is, normally in the prepare, when we see the string, the interpolation has already happened. Now, the interpolation hasn't happened yet. It will happen inside the function HMP. And the basic idea is to change the variables before the interpolation happens. And this is the code reference gets the code block. Then the code reference is executed, and we replace the variables with the syntax for the placeholders. And the string which is returned includes the placeholders. This is the basic idea. And then we return the object with a string and the variables in place. This is the rough idea. We have long way to go now. Because we are not there yet. Changing all variables to question marks is not enough. Which variables were in the code block? We just assumed it's $first, $next, and I don't know, $last. We have to inspect the code block and know which variables are inside. Which variables were interpolated? Maybe not all which were interpolated, and in which order? Because we have to, if we change last and first, it's crucial to know in which order the placeholders happen. And the first answer to getting the right order is not to replace them with question marks, but with tying. So who of you knows tie scalar? Not the majority. You're going to learn a lot today. So if you've been on the talk of Leonard, he mentioned tie when he said magic. So you can, it's overloaded the wrong word. You can, well, it's a kind of overloading. You can tell variables, take variables in Perl and tying them to an object and to a class. And whenever you fetch or you store or you do other operations on the variable, a function is called. So you can provide callbacks which happen on the variable. And there's also a callback for fetch. And in this fetch, we record the accessed variables in order, because every time one of this variable is interpolated, fetch is called. And what fetch does is just push the variable which was interpolated into an array vars and return a question mark. And we have the order. Next is, we just, you all know local, yes? Have you ever used local with private variables? It doesn't work. You can't use it with my variables. Local is a A very nice thing, but it comes from Perl 4, and Perl 4 didn't know my variables, it only knew package variables. It even didn't know our, it was just package variables. So local was just a way to show you how it works, but actually we need a module called PadWalker to inspect the code block and to tell which variables, my variables, private variables, are inside and to change them. And PadWalker provides us with closed over and set closed over. So you know closures? Okay, so the variables inside of the code block are closure variables at that point. And with closed over and set closed over, we can get a list in a hash with all variables which are inside the code block. And with set closed over, we can replace this variable with other variables, our typed variables, which are now acting like Trojan horses and doing exactly what we want at the execution time. So our HMP does define an array bars. It calls a function which does the magic with a PadWalker, with a code reference, and the vars, which has to record the order of our of our placeholders, and then collect the executed, then get the string with the right placeholders because the question marks are returned. And then it restores, for safety, it restores the variable to the old status. So it unties all the stuff and then it returns our object. So next step is, how do we make DBI capable to understanding what we just did? Because DBI gets an object it never heard of, and we want to have it in a compatible way, backwards compatible way. So we don't want to have another module, another DBI module with this patch which has to be maintained and so on. We need some kind of magic to happen. As I said, we don't want to sabotage legacy code. So with prepare, we already solved it because you saw we overloaded the stringification. But we have to understand inside DBI, and it's documented. Oh, this is already the next slide. So we already sorted this. The HMP object stringifies to this placeholder string, so it's no problem. So this is what's actually happening because of the overloading. But inside DBI, which is very well documented, is an attribute called statement. And the object will end up after a prepare unchanged inside the attribute statement. And we can access the original object. So that means because the object is in the statement field of the SCH is statement handle of the DBI, we can access it via the vars. We can access the variables, the references of the variables which were interpolated in the right order. This means that inside the execute, we could do this, which is ugly. Just which is semantically what we want. What we want to achieve is we have an empty execute and it does this. So it takes the variables, the references of the variables, and returns them in the right order. Well, I think I missed a dereferencing step, but okay. Be nice with me. How do we achieve this? And this is genius. This is really genius because I don't know who designed. I have to look up who designed DBI. He provided us with callbacks. You can define callbacks for every function, every method of DBI. And these callbacks, you have child callbacks and you have child callbacks because the database handle returns. I don't know, but then you have the statement handle. I forgot the handle in between. And you can give a child callback for the execute. And this callback is when you call the execute method, it's calling the callback. And we can provide the callbacks for prepare. Prepare we don't need much because it's already done by the overloading. We can use it for debugging, and child callback for the statement handle where the execute hook. And this execute hook does the magic for us. Hey, it looks into the statement attribute, gets the object back from the hookma place, and starts binding them at the right place of the statement handle, so that the placeholders are executed with the right variables. Mission accomplished. Questions so far? Yeah. No, before, I think, in addition. So I didn't know about this. This is very good for debugging, or when I was all thinking where you could use these hooks for if you're going to another database. So how's it called? Migration. If you're trying to migrate to another database, you can use these hooks too, and for debugging and introspection and all this. Yes?
What happens if you interpolate something just to verify
There's no fault tolerance to see that there's a baby card. Well, the baby card, if it has variables, they will be run into the tie mechanism. So yes, this is a good question. This is on the to-do things, to-do slides. So what he was actually asking is, the baby card operator means you have code executed inside the string interpolation. Because what the baby card does is you have, the baby card looks like an array, and arrays are interpolated. If you have the add syntax and you have curly brackets around them, then you can stuff in an anonymous array, and inside this you can stuff Perl code. This is the baby card operator, and then you have injected Perl code. It's not really the safest thing to do. So this is also the question, from which perspective do you see this project? Do I see it as a do what I mean syntax? Or do I see it as a way to control my programmers and to hit on the fingers? I don't know the English expression for it. To slap on the fingers when they do ugly things. So this is, I don't know, 3.0 version question. And if it's a project for migrating old stuff, bad stuff to good stuff. More questions? Because we have time left, so yes. Are you asking if I want to create a complex SQL statement? If it's already interpolated, I can't do anything. But if I want to create a complex SQL statement which has with subqueries which have placeholders in it, I have a solution in the to-do part. More questions? On the to-do slides. More questions? Actually, I wanted to have more slides ready, so I make the questions now so I can stretch the time. Yes.
Yeah, if you're attaching to the callbacks, doesn't that stop from going back with the manual?
Okay, could you repeat slowly?
Because you're attaching a function to the callbacks,
Yeah.
does that stop it from being backward compatible? Because you need to turn those off if you don't want to implement.
No, because the backwards compatibility is by the HMP function. Wait a second. I love code reveal. Reveal.js. It's so the callbacks, no. The callbacks always look into the statement handle if it's an object or not. If it's not an object, it doesn't do anything. So it's backwards compatible. And only the SQL statements where you use this HMP function will have this magic anyway. So, well, the callbacks are everywhere, but, and I also want, you can get the database handle from a special DBI.pm HMP. So this connects, so you can say, I'm only using this database handle with the extra magic in special places. That's the idea. Sometimes I'm not good with because you can navigate in Reveal.js, you can navigate in 2 dimensions, and it's sometimes there. So this HMP returns an object. If the object is not in the statement handle, the callbacks say do as usual. There's no overloading and there's no nothing in the execute. But the point is, DBI is a vast module. It has so many methods. Alone the testing is a long project. So let's go. More questions?
If I wanted to do something like this, but I don't know XML, would I be better off stealing your ideas or something else?
Actually, the next step, I want to have this HMP thing spinned off of the project, have a hold my place module and use it inside. I want to create a module called DBI.x hold my place. And DBI.x hold my place will use a module called hold my place. And hold my place could be used in other projects like XML. But for XML, I would rather use a DSL, but okay, domain-specific language, but that's another talk. So, okay, let's start with the to-do slides. Deep startup structures. For the time being, we only had scalars which were interpreted, but people would like to have certainly have deeper data structures where they have an array and then a hash, so nested. So for this to happen, I need a tie structure. I already have a proof of concept of it. I didn't implement it in the module, where you have a tied array, in this case, which returns a tied hash. These are proxies to the original, and they always return at the end. If it's on the Scala, on the level of the Scala, it will return a question mark, and otherwise, and it will do the recording. Yes? Bonus slides. Good question. I mean, very good. First asking for the critics, and then. So next point, package variables. PadWalker can't inspect our variables or package variables. For this to happen, I already have a proof of concept using bconcise or bterse, because you can define a walker which goes through the code. I could show you the code now, and it parses the op tree of the function of the code reference and finds the package variables which are inside. So I can mimic the PadWalker thing with a package walker. I also want to, if you are asking for it, I want to spin off a module called PackageWalker, which does it. So next thing, nested interpolation and turning it off, which is this one. So nested interpolation. People come and say, yeah, but the main reason why we use interpolation is because we are constructing very complicated SQL statements. So you have a subquery which is included here. And someone said, what about in the back, what about the placeholders which happened here? And if I use this HMP syntax again, in the first place, the interpolation on this level, we see this is an object of the HMP class, and this HMP class did already the decomposition. So if I want to turn it off, I can also have an object which says turn it off. This is one way to do it. Was that too fast? Is it clear more or less? So you can have very complex things. And after thinking of it, I'm not really an SQL guy. I'm not doing an SQL domain-specific language. I'm more into this do what I mean, Perl things, doing magic things, and so. But I think you can really use it for many projects, not only for SQL, this syntax. The next thing is, people think every field, every variable interpolated in SQL is a placeholder, but that's wrong. You can't have a table name or the fields in a select statements replaced by placeholders. So you need exceptions for them. One way to go for this is I was thinking about having a naming convention that when the variable have special names, you don't do the interpolation. Or you have to do another quote identifier for this. The next possibility is to have to blast them into special objects to say this is of a type field, this is of a type table. Then I was thinking, but this is really a bit science fiction to do, to have them as values in a special hash, which is a hash field and hash table, and which is doing other semantics.
One of the things we're going to get into the practical situation is that you want to put all sorts of other stuff in there, may not be fields, may not be tables, may be database too. So index for stuff itself optimize how to do the query. So I would say if you're trying to do this, don't get too specific about it. I think table objects is overkill. You want to have a generic thing that's just going to put in a string. Or maybe we need to build that kind of string before we do the execute. So we do it ourselves and it's completely outside.
What I want to do is have an interface so the user can say, I want to have this and this semantics. So I don't want to have a fixed naming things, but callbacks, and the people can define how they want it, and they can spin off another module which implements what they how they want to have it. But there is also this philosophy of convention over configuration. So I could have a default convention. If they don't want to have the default convention, they can configure it. So there are many ways to address this. So performance, who asked about performance? Yep. The point is, this is quite, if you do all this indirection with ties and overloading and so, it's of course not performant. But you have to see this HMP gets a code block, and the code block is only, it's compiled at compile time. It's not compiled every time. And this HMP could do memoizing. So there's nothing that changes. There are the variables I have to check about the closure variables if I have to adjust them, but that's all the overhead which could happen. And DBI has also a mechanism for caching the the statement. So this can be addressed. The only problem is memoizing. If you remember the HMP function, operates on the parameters the function gets. Now the function gets a code reference. The code reference is not stable. So the code block is compiled once, but the code reference you get is not always the same. So memoizing would get, it's even worse. You could have two HMP functions at two different places getting the same code reference for different code blocks. The solution for this is already this be concise thing that I showed you, because the be concise gets also for the code block, it gets the address where the code is compiled into the memory, and I can identify this. But I also want to push this question back to P5P, because it's really interesting to have a normal possibility to identify a code block, because it's already compiled at compile time, and to identify it by a clear identifier without having the code reference. So what did we learn? If you're not into this project, if you're not into all this magic, I hope you learned a little bit about overloading, about tying, about callbacks in DBI, which were a revelation for me, about inspecting private variables with PadWalking, inspecting package variables with deconcise. I could show you a demo of this, and some other stuff I forgot about and didn't write down. So, more questions? We have 5 minutes. Yes. Good question. At the moment, nothing happens. So this is the design question. Normally, it should be an error. I was thinking as plus, 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 but my problem with publishing code, and people hate me for this, is that I'm too perfectionist. If you're asking all these things, I'm thinking about all these things, and I'm designing, and not publishing code. But perfect is the enemy of good. So I learned something from not COVID, Ovid, from Curtis, Ovid, Poe, that minimal viable product. So all this before the question part, I want to publish in the next 1-2 weeks as a minimal viable product, so people can test it, and I can have a feedback if they even like it, and then I can address all the other stuff. One idea that I had is to have named placeholders, because if you stuff in the execute variables, at which place do you want to replace, which placeholder do you want to replace? And then it would be nice to have the name of the variable which was interpolated and to address it like a hash. So you have the name of the variable, you say, at this time I want to overwrite it with this value. This is one idea to go for it, but this is far above a minimal viable product. Yeah, but I'm addressing DBI and not DBDs. I don't know. Are there database drivers for DBI who do this? Yeah, see. So I started to make a test suite based on SQLite, because SQLite is nice for testing, because you just have the dependency of one module. SQLite is installed automatically. And this was with the testing, and then I want to have on the author level testing with MySQL, MariaDB, and Postgres, but I'm not very experienced with Postgres. And then I hope that this is testing 3 database engines will be sufficiently. Well, I'm already on the DBI level. I could kick Tux if it doesn't work. So who's now the maintainer? I don't know if there are other slides. No, these are more questions.
Have you looked at using B to look for concat operators instead of variable ones?
Excuse me?
Look for concat operators instead of
which operators?
concat.
Concat. String concatenation would work the same way.
Except then it's like baby part operator you get as a whole block rather than as a.
Okay, another problem is in this HMP, it's a code block. It's only returning the last string. Actually, you could use a lot of code inside and do a lot of a lot of bad things could happen inside. So I haven't looked into it to forbid all of this. But if you have a concat, of different strings with a dot,
Yeah, it's compiled the same way.
It's compiled the same way, of course. And the tying mechanism is only on the closure level, so it will happen all the.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but people could do more complicated things. They could say, I want to have the variable inside of the code block without the replaced into a question mark because I want the numification of it and not the stringification and all of this. But 40 minutes are up. But yeah. But normally, at some point, I have to tell my users, you're adults. You should be adults. And you can't make Perl code in a way which is foolproof. I don't know if it's, I don't think it's even possible in any other language. Languages which are totally foolproof are not very productive. I mean, I know a lot of people who love Haskell, for example, but I rarely see many projects implemented in Haskell. More questions, but because our time is up. Thanks for the feedback.